Today we have a very special guest in the studio. She previously worked at McKinsey and Google, and she has taken all of that knowledge and gives it now to others by being a business coach and mentor. Alexandra Levy, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Same, and I'm very curious to hear a little bit about your background story because each superhero has their origin story. So I'm very curious where you started out and what got you into coaching.
Awesome. So it's really interesting that you say about the origin story because that's actually a place that most of my coaching starts. So I'm a firm believer in what you were doing between the ages of 10 to 20 is where you've really mastered your skills, and those skills will continue to show up in your life as you get older. And it's kind of about when you're building a business, what were those skills and how do we return to them? So for me, in terms of my origin story, I was always interested in kind of human behavior, although obviously I wouldn't have thought about it like that at that age. And I think it came from a few different places. The first place is all of my grandparents more or less were immigrants over to the UK. So I was always being exposed to kind of different cultures, different schools of thoughts, and also how they then integrated into the culture within the UK. So that was very present for me in terms of people behaviors from other nationalities. I was also dyslexic in school, and so I think that made me sit back a bit more and be more observant of people and their body language. That was giving me kind of this superpower that I didn't realize until much later on in life. I think dyslexia is often seen as this bad thing, but actually it became really powerful for me in my coaching. And the final thing was my mum actually ran an education business in English and maths. And so in my teenage years, I was working with her. I was tutoring and obviously a form of coaching with children to really understand problems that they were struggling with and then how to break down those problems and to get them to the answer that they needed to get to so that they could leave that session and feel like they could continue learning maths and English and that tool set in the way that they wanted to. And so those are the kind of my background story and the skills I was compounding at that really young age. I then went to university, studied international business and management, which I loved because it was doubling down on all of those elements that I really enjoyed around people's psychology. I learned a lot about human resources in university. I did a placement year in Holland with Mattel for Barbie, so that was awesome. Every little girl's dream, I think, is to work for Barbie. That was really great fun. And as you said at the beginning of the podcast, I left university. I went to McKinsey, Hilton, Dow Jones, and Google, and all those places I was in the HR function, so really solving large people problems. And throughout my time there, I had my colleagues and my friends who would pull me into kind of the musky meeting rooms and be like, can you help me with insert challenge? And those could be a range of different challenges. And I really enjoyed helping people work through the challenge that they were facing and then get to the goal and the outcome that they really desired. And that gave me that real taste for coaching, both on an informal and formal level. So I decided to get my qualifications in coaching to see if this was really the route that I wanted to go down. And that's kind of the first takeaway that I give to people. I very much tested if this path was for me. So if anyone is listening to the podcast who's interested in going down the coaching route, I would suggest testing whether you really enjoy it. Like once you get into coaching and you're doing tens of hours a week in this space, like, are you going to be excited to jump on that call with someone? And so when I was doing my coaching qualification, I chose a school that I could do hundreds of hours of coaching with formally to check that actually I really enjoyed the coaching and I could add value in the space in the way that I wanted to. So got my coaching qualification. Then I quickly ramped up and started to work with executive leaders at companies like Google, Facebook, PayPal, Meta, Adidas, etc. And I started to look around me. I started to join masterminds with other coaches and realized that they weren't having the same level of success that I had had in my business and they weren't able to grow it as quickly. And then I fell across a statistic that said 82% of coaching businesses fail within their first 2 years. And I was like, what? This is crazy, because as you'll know, Nina, like the this industry is really important. We're helping people to become better versions of themselves. And so for me, I wanted to enable those who were really helping and guiding others to becoming the better version of themselves. And so I really spent my 10,000 hours figuring out the frameworks that made me successful, meeting all of the individuals that helped me on the journey, some of whom are multimillionaire, billionaires, and just really deconstructing what they did to get to the success that they did, and also what I did for my business. And once I had that kind of framework and understanding of how I had built to where I got to, that's when my real teaching element came back in. And I was like, right, it's time to take these frameworks and actually help other coaches to build their businesses to six figures in the way that I had done. And so that's the work that I'm doing now. I'm helping other coaches build up their business to that six-figure mark.
Such a powerful story. And I want to dig into all of these frameworks and things that you have figured out along the way in just a second. But what really stuck with me when you were talking about your story was kind of the dyslexia and then also moving abroad, because these are two elements that I have done as well. And I feel it really helps to get into the mode of understanding people, reading people, which can be really helpful when you want to coach. And also to take a step back and be a little bit more observant. When I hear you talk, I hear a lot about I looked at other people, what was working, what wasn't working, what was working for me, what could I transfer to other people. So I think these kind of backwards engineering of success is something that maybe comes when you have had kind of challenges where you needed to step back and see what's working for other people, why is it not working for me?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I think those who succeed are those who are able to really self-reflect and figure out what their blind spots are and push through those quickly. And what I mean by this, I'm just going to give a really common example. If you start going to the gym and after 2 weeks you measure your waist, the inches around your waist, right? Or you measure your weight or some kind of statistic that you're tracking, if that hasn't shifted or changed in that 2-week period, you know that either your diet is ineffective or the way that you're gymming is ineffective, or something needs to be tweaked and changed in order for you to get whatever result you're looking for. And the same is for business. So in business, if you're going to see results, you will see a change happen quickly. And so I think that's really important, that ability to observe and reflect on what is going on, and to add a layer to that without being too attached to the outcome. So sometimes people come to me and they say, Ali, I find sales calls really hard because when someone rejects me, it feels like a personal rejection. Or if someone looks at my offering and they don't like everything in the package, that feels like a rejection because that offer was my baby and it feels like they're rejecting my baby. And that's a really dangerous place to be in, because you have then an unhealthy attachment to the outcomes. And what we're talking about is how do you reflect, observe, and realize, how do I optimize, pivot, tweak things that aren't working in my business's favor? And it's actually not about you as an individual. It's about understanding the audience and your market and adapting to that while staying in your wheelhouse of your expertise and capabilities. So it's a marriage between these two things.
And what I also hear there is kind of the ability to step back and also see what's working. I think what we often do, especially as coaches, is we build these amazing system of 12 weeks of content or whatever it might be. And then we expect that people just gonna come around and buy it instead of, and you posted about this on LinkedIn today, of testing your offer first, before you build anything out. Talk to the people that you want to target, try to figure out what they really need in their life, what is the one big problem that they are facing. Can you talk a little bit about this offer creation, also about finding the unique selling point?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of offer creation, the biggest thing that an entrepreneur needs to do, and this is in a general sense, so not just for coaches, is you need to validate that your offer or your business actually has space in the market, so that there's product market fit. This is where all startups, so seed businesses start, is do we actually have an audience that need the thing that we want to sell? So take a random business, cupcakes, does this town in northwest London need another cupcake shop? Yes or no? And you have to validate that there's a need there before you go ahead and create an offer that may not be wanted by the market. And so the quickest way to kind of validate whether a need exists in a market, and obviously the bit before this, right, is like, who is my niche? Who do I want to talk to? What problem do I want to solve? And so you need to work out this niche part first. And that's kind of a whole other chunk of work that I do with clients that needs to be done before you can create an offer. And if you don't do that work first, what actually happens is you end up with a product that is split in terms of its messaging. So it's not really talking to anyone, it's talking to a general audience. So you have to get really specific on like, who is my audience, understanding why you want that audience, and then with that desire to double down and say, this is my niche. Now I'm going to test my niche and test the product that fits within this space. Okay, so then the quickest way to do this is essentially, I call it like cheap, quick, like, so fail fast. That idea of fail fast is the principle here. Throwing up a landing page to say, I'm about to launch this product, or maybe you say that this product is launched. You want to create either a buy button or a contact me button or a jump on a connection call with me button at the end of this sales page. Another way that you could do this, putting it on emails. I put stuff like this on my Instagram stories before, and just seeing how many responses do you get to this product or this service that you want to launch. So you want to look for a high traction of individuals who are interested in the product or the offering that you want to give to them. And that's your signal that actually this is validated, this is a problem in the market, and these people are looking to solve this problem. And actually I have some people in my audience who will probably be ready to buy once I launch this thing. The biggest mistake that people make is they build out their 12-week program, as you're talking about. They have all the individual modules worked out, and then they launch the product, and then they experience tumbleweed, and they get really frustrated because they're like, I've just put in hours, tens of hours always, to this thing that's not creating any bite or any buy from my audience. And so then I think this is where it hits into the mindset. It starts a negative spiral of, well, this product obviously doesn't work. There's no point in me pushing it. That was a waste of time. That was my waste of energy. And now you're in this like vortex of, well, how do I get out of this? And actually, do I now have the energy to figure out what they want? Or do I kind of repeat that cycle again? And so the best way, as I said, is like, quickly and cheaply throw up that landing page, see if you can get people to buy, jump on a call or respond to you. If people do hit buy and there's a cost associated with it, you can refund them or you could run with the product. And actually what's really interesting here is Elon Musk does this a lot. Often he throws up sales pages, wait lists, and he'll say who's interested in this. And that's what he does before he even goes into launching his products. So this is like concept validation, essentially. You're validating that your concept exists in the market and there's desire for this concept.
I can see how that works for Elon because he has like so many people that are following him on X and on other different platforms. How can we go about this if we have not yet built a very large professional network? We don't have a lot of following on social media. Like if we just throw up a landing page, probably no one is going to click on it. So how would they convert? Is there another way of testing when we don't have a large following yet?
Yes. And I'm pleased that you asked this question because I think sometimes we hear advice and when we're at the beginning stage of our business, it's like, well, that's great advice if I was here, but actually I'm here and I haven't built up that audience yet. And so audience building is a really important topic too, right? These things can work in parallel once you've found your niche. If you don't have any people in like a social media network, what I would say is there are people everywhere, right? You have people in your professional network because most people have had a corporate job before. So is there a section of that corporate network that you can go to and say, hey, this is the next step of my life. I'm actually launching a business. Are you interested in this product? Would this be a fit for you? If so, can we jump on a call to discuss it more? When I actually first started my business, I was leaving Google and I sent out a message to various groups at Google to say, hey, I'm leaving Google, I'm setting up this business. If you have any need for this product, jump on a free call with me. And so it was a really quick way of activating a network and a party essentially that I was already part of. And I think we all have those, but it's about being creative with who they are. So some of us are sports players, we have sports teams that we're part of. Some of us have community groups that we're part of. Some of us come from certain religions, and then we have that group, right, that we can tap into. We've got other things like, and I think this is where you go back to basics. If you just go out and like approach people in a coffee shop, or often some of my leads have come from, I've been on like airplanes, or I've been in beauty appointments, and they've been like, oh, so what do you do for your career? And I start speaking about it, and they say, wow, that's so interesting. Can I please have your details? I'd love to follow up with you. It's about just going back to basics, and that might take a bit more time than, say, an Elon Musk who can throw something out and maybe get a response in 5 seconds, but you're still able to validate it in the same way.
100%. I love that. And I think Alex Hormozi talks about that a little bit, like your WhatsApp contacts, the old Facebook friends. Like you probably have people that you don't even think of that might be interested in an offer like that. Yeah, I really, really like that. If we have now kind of decided, okay, we have this idea, we have tested it with a couple of people, it seems to be something people are interested in. How do we now differentiate ourselves and our offering from others? How do we figure out what is kind of unique about what we offer, and how do we effectively then communicate that to a larger audience that we're trying to build on maybe Instagram, LinkedIn, or whatever other platform we might enjoy?
Okay, so this is a really good question, and it's actually part 2 that I go in my coaching program. I call it the master key. So this is really setting up your strategy. And I'm going to talk about the importance of setting up strategy, and then I will answer your question. Lots of people, when they start any type of business, they are fixated on proving that that business is successful and that business works. So they go straight to this idea of execution. So I hear a lot of people who are fixated on how do I build my audience and how do I convert my audience? So essentially marketing and sales, which I understand, right? Because there is this drive to prove that this concept that you've built can be successful, and that you don't have to then go back to a corporate job with your tail between your legs and be like, this thing failed and now I'm really embarrassed because I have to change my LinkedIn and everyone sees and thinks this business wasn't successful. But the problem is that there are a lot of people who are blindly executing, and there's also a lot of business courses who are teaching individuals just to execute. And what I mean by that is just put the post on LinkedIn, just put the post on Instagram, just send the email newsletter. And without strategy to hold this all up, there is no clearness in terms of direction that the business wants to go in. As you said, how the business is differentiating from those around it, and anything that sits within the strategy of the business. And there are kind of 15 different boxes that I go through within business strategy. And those are really key for the overall differentiation and the success of the business, so that you know the direction that you're going in, right? You want to think of it like a compass. So you set the direction as being north, and that's what you do with the strategy. And then you can move into execution, because when you execute, you can then verify that that's actually taking you north, not northwest, or not slightly off course, right? And that's when we see people with these really like scattergun approaches. They might work tactically for a little bit. They might hit a 10K month here and a 10K month there, but overall their revenue is up and down like this. And that means that there hasn't been a proper strategy set. So in terms of the unique selling point, I think what's really key here, and kind of the best advice that I can give, is to really start to look at the market that you sit in and figure out what isn't working well within that market. So what aren't people doing, and where do you think that you could add value? And a really good example of this is I've just recently worked with someone who is a coach. She sits within the nutrition side of the house, and some of the things that she decided that would be her unique selling point were actually things that don't seem huge but are for the customer. So for example, she noticed that most nutrition coaches take at least 5 days to come back to potential clients. So she was like, okay, I'm going to make it a rule of thumb that I get in touch with people within 24 hours or 12 hours where I can, right? So she's now highly responsive. there were other things in their package that she thought actually didn't make sense from a nutrition standpoint. And so she was like, right, I would strip those out, and those are the main things I'm seeing, and this is what I would add in or change instead. And so it's really about figuring out what the market is doing, and then figuring out what your skill set is and what you've built, as you said, from your origin story and your time before, that then uniquely places you. So you've got most people have their professional background, their personal background, and then how the market is behaving. And so usually in our space of the coaching space, and any business that's kind of built around a personal brand, it's a marriage of these three things, and looking at these three things and thinking, how do I then differentiate myself based on those?
Perfect. So when I think kind of back about the origin story, because we often have like a bigger story that's running in our head, like we have our CV that we can look at and see like, okay, where have we worked? What might resonate with people? How can we go a little bit into that story to extract the things that might resonate with our perfect customer? And how can we then successfully communicate that on our website, on different social media channels? Like, how would you go about that?
So it's actually a really interesting question, because tell you what I have seen a lot of people who you can see that they've met people in their audience, and then they take pieces of their audience story and they make it their own story. And something about it, I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but like you read it and something feels off. It doesn't actually feel like it's in alignment with that person. And so I think there's a space in marketing where people have to find a balance between telling their own story and being authentic to themselves, and then really adding like value to their customer and helping their customers solve a problem. And on top, more than just solve a problem, but do it in a really interesting way and solving their most important problems. So it's called the Holy Trinity. So you've got like giving value, doing it in an interesting way, and solving the most important problem. And so I think that sometimes there's this kind of bro marketing teaching that tells us just figure out what most of your customers' journeys look like and say that was your story. And I'm like adamantly opposed to doing that, because you actually lose who you are, and that eventually comes across, right? And also you're maintaining a lie, which is not the best place to start a business in, right? You want to be in integrity. So I think when you're pulling out your stories, it's about sitting down and really looking at that story and trying to map, and they do this in life coaching often, but like the key points in your life and the differences because of those key points, and then where you were and where you got to and what enabled you to bridge that gap. And that, to me, in a really quick way, becomes your story. So pulling out those key highlights and starting to weave in between what ties them and connects them together. I think I can't remember his quote fully, but Steve Jobs has that beautiful quote around like, it's only when we look back that we can start to connect the dots. So I think it's that real kind of reflection of looking back and seeing how those dots in your life connect and have led you to where you are and why you're now passionate about doing what you're doing.
And I think that's quite an important point, because so many, especially like coaches, but also other founders, they take the strength of kind of keeping this company, like growing this company. It's coming from like a personal pain that they have probably overcome, or that they struggled with so much that they wanted a product to be on the market that kind of could help them and could help their customers. So I think that's very powerful to go back and look at these bits and pieces, put them together, but still staying authentic to who we are, our own story, and then communicating that. I love it. I would say that's kind of how we outwardly market, right? So we would use that on our webpage. We would use that when we create content on different social media platforms. Is there anything in specific that we should take into consideration when it comes to kind of outbound outreach? So people that they haven't been in contact with us, it's kind of like a cold lead. Is there anything specific that we should keep in mind when we are approaching people like that?
Yeah, sure. So outbound marketing is a really interesting space, and I think this is where in my program I start with what's called the unstoppable you, so mindset. And what I find when coaches come into that piece of the program, they always say to me like, I'm really scared of outbound marketing, or there will be something else that is blocking them, right? Could be like a fear of failure, perfectionism, procrastination, lots of different potential mindset traps that happen at the beginning of building a business. But when we look at outbound marketing, I think when I look at most things in business, the first thing to ask yourself is to split off between, is this actually an execution problem, a strategy problem, or a mindset problem, and really figuring out what that piece is before you dive into this idea of, do I do outbound marketing or do I not do outbound marketing? The mindset challenges that I often see with outbound marketing are pieces like, what if I come across too harsh? So what if people just reject me? The fear of rejection is often tied into outbound marketing as well. If I reach out, what if that really upsets someone? I think especially at the beginning of your business, lots of people constantly reaching out to you in direct messages. And sometimes, depending on your personality, that can feel frustrating. And so if that feels frustrating for you, there's a mindset thing of, I don't want to pass that emotion or that feeling on to someone else. So these things can like sit within the mindset category, right? Of like, this is how I feel, and therefore other people must feel the same way. Then it's like a strategy thing. So do you want to use outbound marketing as one of your strategies? And there's some kind of interesting stats around outbound marketing. So 62% of marketers find that outbound marketing efforts are really effective for their business. It often generates 32% more leads. So you can imagine a small business actually, outbound marketing, if you can get behind the benefits of it, could be really beneficial when you're first starting. And then the final bit is like that execution. So the question is like, well, how do I put that note together to show myself in the light that I want to, right? So like there are different ways to outbound market as well. There's different kind of types of messages that you can send, and therefore within those types of messages, there's different things that you can say and different ways that you would want to show up. And so I think the first bit is like questioning, right, where do I sit? And perhaps I sit across a blend of all of these different pieces. And I would say with the mindset thing, when you think about outbound marketing, I'm sure many of us have like gone out on wanted to date, right? Like that is a kind of a form of outbound marketing. You're putting yourself out into the world and seeing what you receive back. And sometimes with some of these things, it's about depowering them and making them less scary than they have to be. Like another form of outbound marketing, as we said earlier, would be like just going out and meeting people at various different appointments and places and speaking about it. Like that's a form actually of outbound marketing. It just maybe feels a bit more natural. So some of this is about having kind of that mindset shift and flip around some of these pieces and just not giving them, as I said, that power or that fear. So then within outbound marketing, I think that's like the space that you want to be figuring out what three buckets you sit in. Is it a blend of those three? And then really tackling based on that.
I would like to go into those buckets in a second again so we can understand them a little bit better and figure out where we're sitting. But what really stuck with me is that example of like when you put founder into your LinkedIn bio or wherever you're active, like there are quite a few people who reach out and you get these messages like, I'm going to do video editing for I don't know how many pounds a week. And it's a very direct kind of sales tactic that they are using, and maybe it's working for some of them, but for me I also felt like this is super annoying and I don't want to sit in someone's inbox and they feel the same kind of annoyed. And something that really helped me with that is I went through a burnout in 2020 when I was a tech founder, and if someone would have reached out to me and had a really good conversation with me around stress and maybe they would have coached me, I think I would have been open to that, and it might have led me in a way where that burnout never came, and it took me kind of several years to recover from that. So that's kind of my motivation now when I reach out to people, is to be like, maybe I can save you from the road that I went down, because it wasn't pretty, and there are so many things that you could implement today to never get to that. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and that speaks really nicely to this idea of there are silent lurkers in our communities and on all of our platforms. And so the rule is 99 one. And so 90% of users are lurkers. They'll never contribute. Then we have 9% of users who contribute a little, and then 1% of users who contribute the most in terms of all their action. And as your business builds, you will find, and generally people find, that they hear from people who they've never engaged with their posts. They've never clicked like it's rare that someone does that. Sometimes, right, on Instagram, like often people will connect with your polls and things like that because it's easy, or they'll like slide the emoji across because it's like quick and simple. But in terms of like big comments or repetitive comments, it's unlikely. And so I think you're speaking to a really important point, which is that there are probably people who are watching you who do need your help. And by you reaching out to them, they are going to get the service that they need to, or maybe you just happen to reach out at the right time when they've been thinking about taking action, and so they'll take a call with you. And this is the importance of like not being scared to outbound message someone, because you may end up in an inbox of someone who really genuinely needs your support and your help and your guidance.
Can you touch a little bit on these 3 buckets that you talked about earlier? Like, how can we figure out where we land and how we then kind of approach the messaging there?
Sure. Okay, so the first bit obviously is the mindset. So I think if you're stuck with mindset, it's really about there's a couple of ways of doing this, right? Sometimes with mindset, it's a real blind spot, as in we don't know what we're doing. We just get to the point where we sit on our laptop, we open up whatever social media app that we're on. Ours is obviously predominantly LinkedIn, and we're like, we know that we've assigned X amount of time to start to do outbound messaging, and then you put it off and you go and walk the dog, or you go and do something else, or you distract yourself, or you say, I haven't tweaked that message exactly how I want it to look like, so I'm not going to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And so it's about taking like these signals of why you creating a roadblock for yourself and sitting with yourself and figuring out what that is. Sometimes that's really hard to do, and sometimes you actually need someone to say, why are you creating this roadblock? And as you know, within coaching, there's this balance between being supportive and also being challenging. So as coaches, part of our journey is saying, like, I can see you having a multi-6-figure business, but you are actually blocking yourself from that. Like, why are you blocking yourself from that? What is going on? And then like hearing what you're saying and working into that and figuring out, okay, how do we break free from that idea and that kind of limiting belief that you have? Then with the strategy piece, I think there are some businesses where they may not need to do outbound, or they may not want to do outbound, right? And you have to think about your overall strategy. And this is, outbound marketing is one piece of marketing. There are many different ways to market, as you know from your sales background as well, right? So it's just one piece of the puzzle, and perhaps you just say to yourself, do you know what, that piece doesn't appeal to me, it doesn't align with my energy, I'm not interested in it, or I don't think it's going to have like high ROI for me. What's the point of doing it? And then you could kind of park it and decide what you do there. And the next bit is execution. So really understanding what message you want to send out and what that message really needs to look like based on your personality, based on how you think your audience will perceive you, and kind of meeting those two things in the middle. And as you spoke about earlier, there's some tactics which go into like really hard selling. And maybe you like hard selling. Maybe you're someone who is a direct personality, who likes zero BS, wants to get to the point, right? And wants to be upfront and in integrity from the start. So you're going to start with a really open, obvious message. And that way you feel like you don't take someone down like a meandering path, and you're being truthful to them the whole route along. So those are the 3 ways that I would start to look at those buckets.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a really nice thing to reflect on, like, what is the roadblock? Where do I sit in these 3 buckets? Like, what makes sense for me right now? I love that. You have touched a couple of times on the word strategy, and I understand that strategy can be very complex. Can we break down strategy a little bit in the beginning of a business? Like, where do we focus our energy? Because there are like a billion things you can do when you first start a business. and we already talked about a few of the aspects of it, but can you kind of big picture break it down? Like, how do I structure my day? What are the strategic things I should think about when I'm just starting out?
Yeah. So I agree. I think at the beginning of my business, I really fell victim to this in terms of what do I do? And then I used to get really, really angry with myself that I was getting closer towards my goal. So my business journey was actually kind of weird. Before I left my corporate job, I was completely full in terms of my books. I actually had to start doing a waiting list, which was a really great, comforting place to be, to know that the concept was validated. Like, I had a good service. I had lots of referrals coming through to me. And so when I left, I had multiple 10K months, and then my income dropped. And the reason why it dropped was because I didn't have a proper strategy in place. What I was doing was I was doing a lot of tactical things that are not rinse and repeat. So the reason why I want to create like this robust strategy is so that you can get to a place where things are rinse and repeat in your business. So you can say, okay, when I pull this lever, this is the outcome that I get. And you can do that with predictability and reliability. And this is where, when you talk to like a more seasoned entrepreneur or various businesses, so for example, I know an Adidas, they will know that in Q4, that's when all their sales peak because it's Black Friday and it's Christmas, right? So they have that predictability, and that's what you want to get to in terms of your business. And that's when you know things are running well, rather than I get a referral sometimes, and sometimes I get 4 referrals and then it drops off for a while. That's not a stable business to build. And so the reason why I'm framing this like this is because usually when we're starting to run a business, we start to go online, we start to research, or how do you build your business? And there's so many people giving so many different pieces of advice that you're like, where do I even start? Someone will say, I got to 7 figures without a website. Someone will say, you have to have a website. Others will say, like, be on all different types of platforms, social media platforms. And others will say, just be on one platform and really like double down and hone in your skills there. And it gets really confusing as to like what to do and how to do it and what's actually going to move your business forward, rather than just be what will be productive work rather than busy work, basically, right? And most people get stuck in this trap of really busy work. And then what I see happens is they get stuck in a trap of busy work and they don't launch or publish any of their busy work. So I have a lot of people who come to me who are like, I have marketing materials, but they're sat in the background. I have a website, but I haven't clicked publish on it yet because it's not quite right, or there's something that I want to amend. And so what I then hear is, you've spent tens of hours on something trying to perfect it, and yet you're not putting it out into market. Something really important here is like, you have to sharpen your ideas in the market. Like, you have to get out to market and check and validate your ideas, and then hear your customers' feedback, take it back, adapt, pivot, refine. And so the journey that I take my clients on in their first 90 days is I have like quite a rigorous journey where they literally have tick boxes that they go through in order to make sure that they're actually doing the right things and that they're not wasting time. Because, as I said, there's all those activities that are going to take you off to the side and actually not get you to the result that you want to. And I think what's important here is people are building uniquely different businesses, even if they are in similar spaces. And there will be some people who come to me and say, I don't want to be on social media. And I go, cool, that's fine. But you need to be able to market. So like, how are we going to market? And then you have to build around that. So it's really about being like really precise in that first kind of like 90 days that I work with someone, so that they are actively moving towards their goal. And that goes through the stages of like mindset, then, as I said, the master key, the strategy, then through the funnel, so sales and marketing, and then your business beams of setting up the infrastructure so that you can scale. But it's about being really precise in terms of what those activities are.
So what I hear there is that I'm kind of setting a North Star, like this is where I want to go, this is the rough idea that I have. Then I try to bring things into the market as quickly as I can. So I try my message out and I just put it on whatever platform or whatever website I have to kind of get feedback. This landing, is it landing with the right kind of client? Am I attracting a lot of people in the DMs, or are people just wanting to chat with me because now I'm their best buddy, but like no one wants to buy from me? So I try to figure out kind of quickly how I want to present myself online, how I want to tell my story. Can you kind of touch a little bit on the big pillars? Because I need an offer. We have talked about that. I need a niche that needs that offer and has a problem that is big enough so people pay. I need to reach people through marketing. So there needs to be some kind of channel to attract them. Is there anything I have missed there that is super important in the beginning?
Yeah. So I think that there's a huge desire when, as I said this, when we set up a business to like execute quickly, sprint. It was quite funny. I was working with a client the other day and she was like, okay, I want to sprint. And I was like, no. And I put like the gate up in front of her and I was like, we have to do these pieces before we sprint. And I think that's often what's missed in a lot of business programs, right? It's this idea of like execute, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. That's actually a really dangerous place to be, because you will just burn out and you'll see that some things are working, but you'll be so focused on execution that you won't have the headspace to go back and actually reflect, look at the data and figure out what's working to move forward. So the stages that I always think about, and this is why I've mapped my business in this way, is like gearing yourself up to be just completely unstoppable. Business and entrepreneurship is really, really not for everyone. It is tough. You have to be resilient, and I want to be careful in some of the things that I say, because it's important to like not give other people narratives, right? But there are times where things click and you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, and then you're off to the races. And then there's times where you're still trying to figure it out and things aren't quite clicking and you're just like, what is going on here? And within this mindset piece, you need to have the resilience to be that unstoppable person. So it's really key that you build this up. And a lot of people come into business and they can't see the most successful version of themselves. And I'm sure that you see it in your business as well, right? You probably get people who come in and they're like really drained and burnt out and they don't feel like they're healthy. And maybe they've gained weight and maybe they have a photo of themselves when they were like 25 and they're like, Nina, I want to get back to where I was when I was 25. But they can't see it happening for themselves, right? And if you can't see that, that's why coaching is this beautiful space, because you can see how you can get that person back to the 25-year-old photo. As can I can see how people can take off and like expand and create wildly successful businesses. So the first for me is really like setting up that mindset of being unstoppable and continuing to go. And maybe for a while, you as the coach are the person who enables that person to see that their potential is where they can get to, and then you help them get there until there's a transference and they realize, actually, like, this is possible for me and I can do this myself. So that mindset is really key. The next stage that we were talking about in terms of that master key, the strategy piece, so it's laying out the foundations of the business, the buckets that sit within the business that ensure a business to succeed and stand out in a marketplace, to differentiate in that marketplace. And then the stage that people skip to, which is kind of the sales and marketing. So within strategy, obviously, as you mentioned, right, you're going to set up who your ideal audience is, like validate that they exist. You either do that through something like market research or tapping into your network. So all of the kind of proof of concepts and ideas need to get validated before you step into actual execution. And that's when we see kind of audience building, execution, the offer creation based on the fact that it is valid and you know that audience exists and they have a problem they want to solve. And when you get to a certain point where you've got tons of people coming in, lots of interests, and things are flowing in a way that you would expect them to be, so that you've got an audience that's being built, lots of leads, lots of calls, as in like coffee calls or connection calls and then sales are happening, that's when you start to build an infrastructure around it, because you can see that your business is scaling and going in the right direction.
I think that is a really beautiful roadmap to kind of go from this just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks to kind of creating a wheel system where we have inputs and we know what kind of outputs they're gonna result in. And then also that piece of like the underlying mindset, having a really strong mindset, which you're gonna need in entrepreneurship. And if you're maybe not in a position where you have that right now, to have a coach that can hold that vision and be like, I can see you over here. We can make this happen together until you can step into that fully yourself. Perfect. Is there anything else that you feel that we have not yet touched up on that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think what's really key is that I often see a few things, people coming into the space and they're confusing a mindset problem with an execution problem. And I think it's really important to, and this depends culturally as well, right? Some cultures are more open to their personal and professional development. It's really important to sit and actually figure out, like, is this my mindset, or is this genuinely an execution problem, or does it sit in a grey area between these two things? And that's also possible. And not feeling like ashamed if it is a mindset problem. I think some of my biggest challenges at the beginning of my business were around not believing in myself, fearing that it would fail, it would come crashing down, and kind of being embarrassed to play and test things in front of people. And the biggest disservice that we can give to ourselves is like brushing things under the rug and being like, it will go away over time, or like it won't be a problem. It's like, sit, figure out what's going on, get the help if you need to, get support from peers. There's loads of ways to kind of solve issues, but it's really important to figure out try to figure out with someone else what is going on, and then being able to kind of grow through that.
If people would like to figure that out together with you, where can they go to find more about you? Where can people find your offer? How do we reach you?
So I am on LinkedIn under Alexandra Levy. I post 5 times a week, so hopefully there'll be something interesting within those posts. Feel free to also DM me and reach out, and then maybe we can share my website link in the bio below. But any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help you, even if it's just a bit of guidance on your journey. My mission is about getting more females to be really successful in this space. And given that 82% of coaching businesses fail in their first 2 years, I would just love to see that number change. And then the stat in the UK is, I think, 6% of female-owned businesses, only 6% of female-owned businesses reach 6 figures. So I think it's time for us females to see more success in our businesses and really thrive.
100%. And we're going to have both of these linked down below for everyone who wants to check that out. Ali, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for your time, Nina. Speak to you soon.
All right, tribe. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and a comment below. There's going to be new episodes dropping every Wednesday, covering everything from entrepreneurship to health, basically giving you all the tools that you need to peak perform in business and in your life. So please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This is a one-woman show. There is no network, there are no sponsors, and there is no editing team behind this. So it's up to me and you to spread the word about it. So if you have a friend who might benefit from what you learned today in this episode, please make sure to share a link with them. I see you next Wednesday. Much love.